December 3rd, 1944. The frozen fields east of Cologne, Germany. Hauptmann Ernst Bäumer's gloved hand trembled as he lowered his binoculars, not from the -12-degree cold that had plagued his panzer company for 3 days, but from what he had just witnessed. 200 meters across the whitened landscape, his newest Tiger I, tank number 213, sat motionless with smoke curling from its turret ring. The commander, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Hartmann, lay dead in the snow beside it. The American Sherman that had killed them was already reversing into cover, its 76mm gun still elevated at firing position. Bäumer had watched the entire engagement through his optics. Hartmann had positioned the Tiger perfectly, hull down behind a snow-covered berm, presenting only the heavily armoured turret to the approaching Americans. Standard doctrine. The Sherman had stopped at approximately 800 meters, fired once, and Hartmann's Tiger simply died. No ricochet, no second shot needed. One round through the Tiger's frontal turret armour, something Bäumer had been assured was impossible from a Sherman's gun at any combat range. In his 18 months commanding heavy tanks, first with the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion in Normandy, now with Panzer Brigade 106 during the Ardennes counteroffensive, Ernst Bäumer had developed an almost religious faith in the Tiger's frontal invulnerability. That faith died in the snow beside Oberfeldwebel Hartmann. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The mythology of Tiger invincibility had been carefully constructed through 2 years of combat reports, propaganda, and genuine tactical success. When the Tiger I first entered service in late 1942, it represented a quantum leap in armoured protection. The frontal turret armour measured 100 mm thick, vertical, manufactured from face-hardened steel that could defeat any Allied tank gun then in service. The gun mantlet, that massive curved shield protecting the 88mm KWK-36 gun, ranged from 100 to 120 mm depending on the specific production variant. Allied intelligence agencies had studied captured Tigers extensively, and their conclusions had been disseminated throughout American and British tank units. The Tiger's frontal armour was effectively immune to 75mm Sherman guns at all ranges. The improved 76mm gun, introduced in mid-1944, could theoretically penetrate the Tiger's side armour at close range, but frontal penetrations remained impossible except under the most favourable circumstances, meaning point-blank range against the lower hull, an impractical scenario in actual combat. This assessment shaped Allied tank doctrine throughout 1944. When encountering Tigers, Sherman crews were instructed to call for tank destroyers equipped with 90mm guns, request air support, or attempt flanking maneuvers using superior numbers and mobility. Direct frontal engagement was explicitly discouraged as tactically suicidal. The Tiger weighed 54 tons, mounted the legendarily effective 88mm gun derived from the Flak 36 anti-aircraft weapon, and could destroy Shermans from ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Its armor protection, particularly the frontal arc, had proven resistant to every weapon Allied forces deployed routinely until late 1944. German tank commanders understood these advantages intimately and built their tactics around them. Ernst Bäumer had joined the Wehrmacht in 1936, trained as a panzer officer at the armour school in Münster, and commanded Panzer Mark IIIs during the French campaign of 1940. He had fought in Russia, where he first encountered the Soviet 34, and learned that German technical superiority was not absolute. Wounded at Kursk in July 1943, he recovered in Germany and received assignment to the newly forming Heavy Panzer Battalions equipped with Tigers. The training emphasized the Tiger's capabilities relentlessly. Instructors at the Paderborn Proving Grounds demonstrated how American 75mm rounds bounced harmlessly off Tiger armor. Gunnery officers explained that the 88mm gun could penetrate any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was ineffective. Tactical doctrine stressed aggressive employment, using the Tiger's armor to absorb enemy fire while destroying Allied tanks methodically from protected positions. Bäumer had internalized these lessons through 9 months of combat in Normandy. His company had engaged British Shermans, American Shermans, Churchill tanks, Cromwells, and various tank destroyers. In every engagement, the pattern held consistent. Allied rounds struck Tiger armor and ricocheted or shattered. German rounds penetrated Allied armor and destroyed targets with single shots. The exchange ratio favored German crews overwhelmingly. Bäumer's company had destroyed 47 Allied tanks in Normandy while losing only 3 Tigers, 2 to mechanical failure and 1 to a lucky shot from a British 17-pounder Firefly that penetrated the thinner rear armor. No Allied tank had ever penetrated his Tigers frontally. The withdrawal from France had been chaotic but tactically successful for Bäumer's unit. His remaining Tigers covered the retreat of other formations, destroying and pursuing Allied armor with methodical efficiency. By September 1944, his company had pulled back into Germany itself, receiving replacement tanks and inexperienced crews drawn from training depots depleted by casualties across all fronts. The new Tigers came from the Henschel factories, with modifications reflecting combat experience. Zimmerit anti-magnetic paste coated the hull to prevent magnetic mine attachment. Steel wheel rims replaced rubber-rimmed road wheels that had proven vulnerable to Soviet anti-tank rifles. The gun mantlets on newer production Tigers, designated Ausführung E, incorporated improved armor geometry that eliminated a ballistic trap where rounds striking the lower mantlet edge could deflect downward into the thinner hull roof. In early November 1944, Bäumer's company was redesignated as part of Panzer Brigade 106, a newly formed heavy tank unit assigned to the Strategic Reserve for the upcoming Ardennes offensive. The plan, codenamed Wacht am Rhein, called for a massive armoured thrust through the Belgian Ardennes, splitting American and British forces, capturing Antwerp and forcing the Western Allies to negotiate a separate peace. German High Command had assembled a formidable armoured force for this operation, including nearly every operational Tiger and King Tiger in the Western Theatre. Bäumer received his operational briefing on November 28 at brigade headquarters near Bad Münstereifel. The intelligence officer's assessment of American armor capabilities proved catastrophically outdated. American forces in the Ardennes sector were assessed as poorly equipped, primarily with older 75mm Shermans. Recent American reinforcements reportedly included some 76mm Shermans, but these were dismissed as marginally improved versions, still incapable of threatening Tigers frontally. The briefing mentioned American tank destroyers, equipped with 3-inch and 90mm guns as the primary threat, but noted these vehicles were thinly armoured and vulnerable to German fire. No mention was made of any ammunition improvements or new projectile types. The intelligence assessment concluded that American armor in the target sector posed manageable threats that Tiger companies could neutralize through standard doctrine and tactics. The offensive launched on December 16, 1944, with initial success that validated German planning assumptions. American units, caught by surprise and heavily outnumbered, fell back in confusion. Bäumer's company advanced through snow-covered forests, encountering minimal resistance the first 2 days. The few American tanks his crews engaged were destroyed easily, exactly as doctrine predicted. By December 18th, the lead elements of the 6th Panzer Army had penetrated 30 kilometers into American-held territory, and optimism spread through German command levels. Then the weather cleared on December 23rd, and American air power returned with devastating effect. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs swarmed over German columns, attacking with rockets, bombs, and heavy machine guns. Tiger companies, concentrated on narrow forest roads, presented lucrative targets. Bäumer lost 2 tanks to air attack on December 24th, not destroyed completely but damaged sufficiently to require evacuation to rear area maintenance depots. More concerning, American resistance stiffened noticeably. The chaotic retreat of the first days ended. American units established defensive positions, coordinated artillery fire effectively, and counterattacked with alarming speed. By December 28th, the Ardennes offensive had stalled. German spearheads, unable to capture critical fuel depots, were running out of gasoline. American reinforcements, rushed from other sectors, had contained the penetration. The 6th Panzer Army, which had been assigned the main thrust toward Antwerp, was locked in brutal fighting around Elsenborn Ridge and had failed to achieve its breakthrough objectives. Bäumer's brigade received orders to support renewed offensive operations toward the Meuse River crossings, a mission requiring movement through increasingly well-defended American positions. The engagement on December 3rd actually occurred on January 3rd, 1945. Bäumer's company, reduced to 11 operational Tigers from the original 14, was advancing toward American positions east of Houffalize when they encountered elements of the American 2nd Armored Division. The terrain favored defense, with rolling hills providing excellent hull-down positions and patches of forest offering concealment. American forces had clearly prepared the battlefield, with tank destroyers and Shermans positioned in mutually supporting positions that created overlapping fields of fire. Bäumer deployed his Tigers according to standard doctrine, using their superior range and armor to engage American positions from protected locations. His own tank, hull down behind a stone farmhouse wall, engaged an American Sherman at approximately 1,200 meters. The 88mm round struck the Sherman's turret and the tank exploded, its ammunition cooking off in a fireball, visible even through the falling snow. 2 more Shermans attempted to flank from the north but withdrew after one was destroyed and the other damaged by accurate German fire. The engagement appeared to be progressing exactly as expected. Then Oberfeldwebel Hartmann's Tiger, positioned 300 meters to Bäumer's left on slightly higher ground, reported enemy armor approaching from the east. Hartmann maneuvered his Tiger to a prepared position behind an earthen berm, exposing only the turret and gun, textbook positioning that maximized his armor advantage. Through his binoculars, Bäumer watched as 2 American Shermans emerged from a tree line approximately 800 meters from Hartmann's position. They were 76mm variants, identifiable by their longer gun tubes and the muzzle brake that distinguished them from the shorter 75mm weapons. The first Sherman fired almost immediately. The round struck harmlessly in the frozen earth 10 meters short of Hartmann's Tiger. Hartmann's gunner returned fire, and the Sherman exploded, its thinner armor no match for the 88mm armor-piercing round. The second, Sherman advanced boldly, moving forward rather than retreating as doctrine suggested when encountering Tigers. This aggressive behavior should have concerned Bäumer, but his attention was divided between multiple tactical problems across his company's defensive line. The Sherman stopped at approximately 800 meters, presenting a clean frontal profile. Hartmann's gunner fired again but missed, the round passing over the Sherman's turret, a rare error that Bäumer attributed to cold, affecting the gun's hydraulic systems. Before Hartmann's crew could reload, the Sherman fired. Bäumer watched through his commander's cupola optics, expecting to see the round ricochet off Hartmann's turret armor. Instead, the impact sparked briefly on the gun mantlet, and instantly, smoke began pouring from Hartmann's turret. The hatch flew open, and 3 crew members scrambled out, but Hartmann never appeared. The Sherman reversed into cover before any other German tank could engage it. Bäumer ordered 2 Tigers to advance and recover Hartmann's tank, but American artillery began falling before they could reach it. The engagement continued for another 90 minutes, with Bäumer's company destroying 6 American tanks while losing 2 Tigers to flanking fire from tank destroyers. As darkness fell, both sides disengaged, leaving Hartmann's Tiger immobilized in no man's land. That night, Bäumer led a recovery team to examine the damaged Tiger. What they found challenged everything he understood about Tiger vulnerability. The American round had struck the gun mantlet slightly to the right of the 88mm gun tube, approximately where the mantlet was thickest, nominally 120mm of curved, face-hardened steel. Instead of the shallow crater and stress cracks typical of rounds that failed to penetrate, they found a clean hole approximately 76mm in diameter punched completely through the mantlet. The penetrator had continued through the gun breech, destroyed the elevation mechanism, and detonated ready ammunition stored immediately behind the gun. The explosion had killed Hartmann instantly and wounded 2 other crew members who had managed to escape. Bäumer examined the entry hole carefully with a flashlight. The edges were smooth, not shattered as would be expected from a round that had fractured during penetration. The penetration angle was nearly perpendicular despite the mantlet's curved surface, indicating extremely high impact velocity. Most disturbing, They found fragments of the penetrator inside the turret, dark grey metal that looked nothing like the steel fragments typical of armor-piercing shells. One piece, approximately the size of a turret playing card, felt abnormally heavy for its size. The recovery team towed Hartmann's Tiger back to the brigade maintenance area, where German ordnance specialists conducted a more thorough examination. The mantlet was photographed, measured, and metallurgically analysed. The penetrator fragments were collected and sent to the Army Weapons Office for analysis. The initial field report, which Bäumer signed on January 4th, noted simply that an American 76mm gun had achieved frontal penetration of Tiger turret armour at 800 metres range, a result previously considered impossible. The ordnance report returned 1 week later with disturbing conclusions. The penetrator fragments were tungsten carbide, one of the hardest materials known to metallurgy, with a density of 15.6 grams per cubic centimetre, nearly twice that of steel. Microscopic examination revealed a composite projectile design, a tungsten carbide core surrounded by a lightweight aluminum or steel carrier that separated during flight. The design concentrated kinetic energy into an extremely small, extremely hard penetrator, travelling at velocity estimated at over 1,000 meters per second based on the penetration characteristics. The Americans had deployed sub-caliber tungsten ammunition, a development German intelligence had failed to detect or predict. More alarming, they had apparently distributed this ammunition to standard Sherman tank units, not just specialized tank destroyers. The implications were immediately clear to anyone who understood armored warfare. If American Shermans could penetrate Tiger frontal armor at combat ranges, the fundamental tactical calculus that had governed German heavy tank employment for 2 years had just been invalidated. The development of 76mm high-velocity armor-piercing ammunition began not as a response to the Tiger threat specifically, but as part of a broader American effort to address the growing disparity between German and Allied tank capabilities that became apparent during the Normandy campaign. In early 1944, American Ordnance Department engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland were acutely aware that standard armor-piercing ammunition fired from the 76mm M1 gun could not reliably defeat the frontal armor of Germany's newest tanks. The Panther, Tiger, and the newly introduced King Tiger all possessed armor protection that exceeded the penetration capability of American tank guns at normal combat ranges. The solution lay in physics and metallurgy rather than simply building larger guns. A conventional armor-piercing projectile relies on kinetic energy to defeat armor, the energy being a function of mass multiplied by velocity squared. Increasing velocity, therefore, has exponentially greater effect than increasing mass, but velocity is limited by the strength of gun barrels and the amount of propellant that can be safely burned. The breakthrough came through sub-caliber projectile design, using a very dense, very hard penetrator core surrounded by a lightweight carrier that boosted muzzle velocity while concentrating impact energy into a smaller area. Tungsten carbide, with its exceptional hardness and density, was the ideal material for penetrator cores. American metallurgists had been experimenting with tungsten ammunition since 1942, developing what became known as high-velocity armor-piercing, or HVAP, ammunition. The 76mm T 4-round, later standardized as the M93, consisted of a tungsten carbide core weighing approximately 8 kilograms, surrounded by an aluminum alloy body and a steel nose cap. Upon firing, the complete projectile traveled down the gun barrel. Once it left the muzzle, the lightweight aluminum body acted as a sabot, maintaining stability during flight before the core separated on impact, delivering its kinetic energy to the target. The ballistic performance exceeded conventional ammunition dramatically. Standard M62 armor-piercing capped rounds, fired from the 76mm M1 gun, achieved a muzzle velocity of 792 meters per second. The M93 HVAP round achieved 1,036 meters per second, a 44% increase in velocity that translated to more than doubled kinetic energy. At 1,000 yards, approximately 914 meters, the M62 could penetrate 109 millimeters of homogeneous armor plate at 0 degrees obliquity. The M93 could penetrate 100 to 60 millimeters under identical conditions, a 47% improvement. This penetration capability had profound implications for engaging German heavy armor. The Tiger I's frontal turret armor, nominally 100 millimeters thick and vertical, fell within the M93's penetration envelope at ranges up to 1,000 meters. The gun mantlet, despite being thicker at 100 to 120 millimeters, was curved rather than flat, and the HVAP round's high velocity and hard penetrator could defeat it at combat ranges, where previously penetration had been impossible. Even the King Tiger's 150mm frontal turret armor became theoretically vulnerable at close ranges, though practical combat conditions made such engagements difficult. However, American production of HVAP ammunition faced severe constraints that limited its battlefield impact throughout 1944 and into 1945. Tungsten was a strategic material with competing demands across multiple war industries. China supplied approximately 36% of global tungsten production before the war. But transporting this material from China to American factories required shipping capacity that was always in short supply. Domestic American tungsten production from mines in Colorado, Nevada, and California supplemented imports but could not meet total demand. Machine tool manufacturing consumed vast quantities of tungsten for cutting edges that could shape hardened steel at high speeds. Without tungsten carbide tooling, American factories could not produce the millions of artillery shells, aircraft engines, and other precision components required for total war. Armor-piercing ammunition for multiple calibers, from 20mm aircraft cannon rounds to 3-inch anti-tank gun projectiles, all competed for available tungsten supplies. The Army Ordnance Department was forced to prioritize allocation, distributing limited HVAP production among various weapons systems based on tactical necessity assessments that often lagged behind battlefield realities. Production of 76mm HVAP began slowly in mid-1944. July saw only 1,000 rounds produced. August production increased to 1,000 rounds. September yielded approximately 1,500 rounds. These quantities were absurdly inadequate for an army, deploying thousands of Sherman tanks across multiple theaters. By comparison, conventional 76mm ammunition was produced at rates exceeding 1 million rounds monthly. The scarcity of HVAP meant that even units equipped with 76mm Shermans often possessed only a handful of these specialized rounds, if any at all. Distribution priorities favored tank destroyer battalions whose primary mission focused specifically on defeating enemy armor. M18 Hellcat and M36 Jackson tank destroyers, both mounting 76mm and 90mm guns respectively, received preferential allocation of HVAP ammunition. Sherman tank battalions, with their broader mission of infantry support and exploitation, often received minimal allocations. This created operational friction when Sherman units encountered German heavy armor but lacked the ammunition necessary to engage effectively. By November 1944, as German forces prepared for the Ardennes offensive, average American tank battalions in Europe possessed approximately 5 to 7 HVAP rounds per 76mm Sherman. A typical Sherman company with 17 tanks would have perhaps 85 to 100 HVAP rounds total, enough for perhaps 2 or 3 major engagements before exhausting supply. Resupply was uncertain and slow, as production remained constrained, and transportation networks struggled to deliver priority ammunition through winter weather and disrupted logistics chains. The German Army Weapons Office received the first captured M93 HVAP round in late September 1944, recovered from a destroyed American tank destroyer near Aachen. Initial examination revealed the tungsten carbide core and composite construction immediately. German ordnance engineers understood the implications because Germany had developed similar ammunition years earlier. The Panzer Granate 40, using a tungsten carbide core, had been developed for German anti-tank guns and tank weapons in 1940 through 1941. German engineers had pioneered sub-caliber ammunition design and understood both its potential and its limitations. What shocked German analysts was not the technology itself, but the scale of American deployment. Germany's own tungsten supplies had always been critically limited. Sweden provided some tungsten through shipments that became increasingly uncertain as the war turned against Germany. By 1944, German tungsten reserves were so depleted that production of tungsten carbide ammunition had essentially ceased. Available tungsten was hoarded for machine tools necessary for aircraft engine production, considered more critical to Germany's survival than specialized tank ammunition. German tanks fought with conventional steel ammunition, while American industry was equipping even medium tanks with tungsten rounds. The intelligence assessment prepared by the Army Weapons Office in October 1944 concluded that American tungsten ammunition represented a significant tactical development, but estimated that production would be limited by tungsten scarcity. German analysts correctly identified that the United States imported tungsten from China and assumed that shipping constraints would limit availability. What they failed to grasp was the scale of American industrial organization and the priority given to ammunition production once the Panther and Tiger threat became apparent. American logistics could deliver tungsten from Chinese mines to European battlefields in quantities that, while never adequate to meet demand, still vastly exceeded anything German industry could produce by late 1944. The Weapons Office report reached field commanders in abbreviated form during November 1944. Heavy Panzer Battalion commanders received notices that American forces might possess improved armor-piercing ammunition capable of penetrating Tiger armor under favorable circumstances. The warnings emphasized that this ammunition was likely in short supply and that standard tactical doctrine remained valid. Tiger commanders should continue to rely on their armor protection, while remaining aware that frontal penetrations, though unlikely, were now theoretically possible. This tepid warning failed to prepare crews psychologically for the reality of facing HVAP-equipped Shermans in combat. For 2 years, Tiger crews had internalized the belief in their frontal invulnerability. Training, combat experience, and survivor accounts all reinforced this conviction. The idea that a Sherman, the tank German crews had learned to dismiss as inferior, could frontally penetrate a Tiger seemed nearly impossible. When it happened, as it did to Oberfeldwebel Hartmann and numerous other Tiger commanders during the Ardennes fighting, the psychological impact was devastating. Lieutenant Hans Pfeiffer commanded a Tiger in the 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion during the Ardennes offensive. His personal diary, recovered after the war and now housed in the German Federal Archives, provides remarkable insight into how HVAP ammunition affected German tank crew morale. His entry from January 7, 1945 reads, "We encountered American Shermans near Borsy today. 4 of them, the long-barreled 76mm variants, standard engagement. We destroyed 2 at 1,000 meters. The 3rd Sherman fired once before we could reload. Müller's Tiger, hull down, perfectly positioned. The round struck his mantlet, and Müller simply died. No explosion, just smoke from the turret. We killed the Sherman seconds later, but Müller was gone. 3 years he survived. Russia, Kursk, Normandy. A Sherman killed him. The crew recovered his body tonight. The hole in the mantlet was clean, not shattered. This is new. This changes everything." Pfeiffer's subsequent entries document the spreading awareness among Tiger crews that their armor was no longer absolutely protective. By mid-January, multiple Tigers in his battalion had been penetrated frontally by Sherman fire. Crew behavior changed noticeably. Where previously Tiger commanders had positioned their vehicles aggressively, confident in their armor, they now showed greater caution. Hull-down positions that exposed the turret, once considered nearly invulnerable, were now avoided when possible. Engagement ranges increased as commanders tried to exploit their superior gun range while staying beyond what they believed was the effective range of American tungsten ammunition. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. This tactical caution, while individually rational, had strategic consequences that German commanders could not afford. The entire operational plan for the Ardennes offensive depended on rapid exploitation by armored spearheads. Tiger and King Tiger battalions were supposed to lead breakthrough operations, using their armor to absorb enemy fire while smashing through American defensive positions. When Tiger crews became more cautious, advance rates slowed. Time was the one resource Germany could not spare. Every day of delay allowed American reinforcements to arrive, allowed supplies to be repositioned, and allowed defensive positions to be strengthened. American tank crews, meanwhile, experienced the opposite psychological trajectory. Through late 1944, American tankers had developed a healthy respect for German heavy armor that sometimes bordered on fatalism. The Shermans' limitations against Panthers and Tigers were well understood at crew level. Men who had watched their rounds bounce harmlessly off Tiger armor while friends died in burning Shermans did not need technical briefings to understand they were outmatched in direct engagements. The arrival of HVAP ammunition, even in limited quantities, provided hope and tactical options where none had existed. Sergeant James Mitchell of the 2nd Armored Division recorded his first experience with HVAP in a letter to his family dated January 9, 1945. "We got special ammunition last week, only 6 rounds per tank, but they told us it can punch through Tiger armor if we hit the right spot. Today we proved it. Encountered a Tiger at maybe 800 yards. I had Kowalski load HVAP and we aimed for the turret front. The first round sparked off and might have hit the gun, but the second round went straight through. Tiger just stopped. The crew bailed out. We actually killed a Tiger from the front. The whole crew is different now. Confident, like we can actually fight these things instead of just running or calling for air support." This psychological transformation, multiplied across hundreds of American tank crews who witnessed successful HVAP engagements, fundamentally altered tactical behavior. Sherman crews who possessed HVAP became more willing to engage German heavy armor directly rather than waiting for tank destroyers or attempting risky flanking maneuvers. This aggressiveness, even with very limited special ammunition, created tactical pressure that German commanders struggled to counter. The technical limitations of HVAP were significant, but often overshadowed by its successes in combat reports. Tungsten carbide, while extremely hard, is also brittle. At impact velocities below approximately 700 meters per second, the penetrator core could shatter on contact rather than penetrating, especially when striking sloped armor at oblique angles. This meant HVAP effectiveness declined significantly beyond approximately 1,000 to 1,200 meters, depending on target angle and armor hardness. American crews learned through experience, sometimes fatal, that HVAP was not effective at all ranges against all targets. The Tiger's glacis plate, 100 mm thick and sloped, remained highly resistant to 76 mm HVAP at most combat ranges. The extreme slope meant that even the high-velocity tungsten penetrator would often ricochet or shatter rather than penetrating. The turret front and gun mantlet represented much more favorable targets, being vertical or curved rather than steeply sloped. Crew training emphasized aiming for these specific areas, but combat conditions rarely allowed such precise shot placement. Targets moved, visibility was limited, range estimation was imprecise, and the stress of combat affected accuracy significantly. Documented cases of HVAP failures are less well preserved than successes, but they occurred frequently. On January 15, 1945, near Hofeleis, a platoon of Shermans from the 3rd Armored Division engaged a King Tiger at approximately 900 meters. The lead Sherman fired 3 HVAP rounds at the King Tiger's frontal turret. All 3 rounds struck but failed to penetrate the 150 mm armor, merely cratering the surface. The King Tiger destroyed 2 Shermans before the platoon withdrew. This engagement demonstrated that HVAP, while a significant improvement, did not make Shermans equal to Germany's heaviest tanks under all circumstances. The King Tiger, officially designated Panzerkampfwagen Tiger Ausführung B, posed a particularly difficult problem even for HVAP-equipped Shermans. Its frontal turret armor measured 150 mm at 8 degrees from vertical, creating an effective thickness of approximately 152 mm. The glacis plate was 150 mm at 50 degrees slope, creating effective thickness exceeding 200 mm. American testing determined that 76 mm HVAP could theoretically penetrate King Tiger turret armor at ranges under 400 meters under optimal conditions. but such close-range engagements against a tank mounting an 88mm gun were tactically suicidal. The broader pattern that emerged through December 1944 and January 1945 showed that HVAP gave American Sherman crews a fighting chance against Tigers at medium ranges, made Panthers vulnerable frontally for the first time, but left King Tigers largely immune except under exceptional circumstances. This was still a dramatic improvement over the previous situation, where Shermans could not reliably penetrate any German heavy armor frontally at combat ranges. German tactical responses to HVAP evolved rapidly as awareness spread. By late January, Tiger Battalion commanders were issuing specific guidance about engaging 76mm Shermans. Engagement ranges should exceed 1,200 meters when possible, exploiting the 88mm gun's superior range. When close engagement was unavoidable, Tigers should position to present the glacis rather than the turret to enemy fire. Commanders should avoid static hull-down positions that exposed the turret for prolonged periods. These adaptations reduced Tiger vulnerability, but also reduced their offensive effectiveness, as cautious positioning and longer engagement ranges slowed breakthrough operations. The industrial dimension of the HVAP story reveals much about the contrasting war economies of the United States and Germany by late 1944. American tungsten imports from China totaled approximately 3,000 metric tons in 1944, supplemented by roughly 1,200 tons of domestic production. This 4,200 tons had to serve multiple competing needs, but American industrial planners successfully allocated sufficient quantities to produce tens of thousands of HVAP rounds across multiple calibers while maintaining machine tool production and other tungsten applications. Germany's tungsten situation was catastrophic by comparison. Swedish tungsten exports to Germany, never large, had declined to negligible amounts by mid-1944 as Sweden recognized Germany's inevitable defeat and stopped cooperating with German war production. German domestic tungsten resources were minimal. By December 1944, German tungsten reserves were estimated at less than 100 metric tons, barely sufficient for critical machine tool maintenance. Production of tungsten carbide ammunition had ceased entirely. German tanks fought exclusively with conventional steel ammunition that was increasingly ineffective against improved American and Soviet armor. This disparity in strategic materials extended beyond tungsten to virtually every critical resource. Germany lacked adequate petroleum, requiring expensive synthetic fuel production that consumed resources needed elsewhere. American petroleum production exceeded 40 billion barrels annually in 1944, more than all Axis powers combined. Germany struggled to obtain rubber, copper, nickel, and numerous other materials essential for modern warfare. American industry had access to global resources through secure shipping lanes protected by overwhelming naval superiority. The Battle of the Bulge concluded in late January 1945, with German forces in full retreat, having exhausted their fuel, ammunition, and offensive capability without achieving any strategic objectives. The Ardennes offensive cost Germany approximately 800 tanks and assault guns, including approximately 120 Tigers and King Tigers, armored vehicles that could not be replaced given collapsed German production capacity. American losses were higher in absolute numbers, but were replaced within weeks through steady production from factories immune to strategic bombing. Ernst Bäumer survived the Ardennes fighting, but lost 11 of his original 14 Tigers by the end of January. 3 were destroyed by HVAP-equipped Shermans, achieving frontal turret penetrations at ranges between 600 and 1,000 meters. 4 were destroyed by American tank destroyers with 90mm guns. 2 were destroyed by air attack. 2 were abandoned due to mechanical failure and lack of recovery vehicles. By February 1st, his company had been reduced to 3 operational Tigers and was withdrawn to Germany for reconstitution that never occurred. His final combat action report, filed on February 4, 1945, provided candid assessment of HVAP's tactical impact. American 76mm tanks now pose a credible frontal threat to Tiger armor at medium ranges. The psychological effect on crews has been significant. Men who previously felt confident in their armor protection now exhibit caution that borders on timidity. Aggressive tactics are no longer possible when crew confidence has been undermined. The Americans have not achieved technical parity, but they have negated our armor advantage sufficiently that numerical and logistical superiority now determines outcomes. This assessment, arriving at higher command levels in February 1945, came far too late to influence German strategic planning. The war was irreversibly lost. Soviet armies were advancing through Poland toward Berlin. American and British forces were preparing to cross the Rhine River and invade Germany proper. German industrial production was collapsing under sustained strategic bombing and loss of territory containing critical factories and resources. The Luftwaffe had been driven from the skies. The Kriegsmarine no longer contested Atlantic shipping lanes. Germany's military situation was hopeless, regardless of tank ammunition types. The final months of the European war saw HVAP production increase as tungsten supplies became less constrained by competing demands. By March 1945, American factories were producing approximately 7,000 rounds of 76mm HVAP monthly. By April, production exceeded 10,000 rounds monthly. But by this point, German armoured resistance had largely collapsed. The Rhine crossings in March encountered minimal armour opposition. German tank units, immobilised by fuel shortages, were bypassed or destroyed by air attack before American ground forces even engaged them. The last significant armoured engagement involving Tigers occurred on April 16, 1945, near the Seelow Heights east of Berlin, where German forces attempted to stop the Soviet advance. Soviet accounts document 34 85s and IS-2 heavy tanks, destroying numerous German tanks, including Tigers, at close range in brutal urban fighting. No American HVAP ammunition was involved, as Soviet forces used their own specialized armor-piercing ammunition, including tungsten-cored rounds, developed independently of American designs. The final assessment of HVAP's impact must account for both its technical effectiveness and its production limitations. In the approximately 5 months between first widespread combat employment in early December 1944 and Germany's surrender in May 1945, American forces fired perhaps 40,000 to 50,000 rounds of 76mm HVAP in combat. This represented a tiny fraction of total 76mm ammunition expenditure, but achieved disproportionate tactical impact against German heavy armor. Documented Tiger losses to all causes during this period total approximately 300 vehicles on the Western Front. Of these, perhaps 20 to 30 were confirmed destroyed by frontal penetrations from 76mm HVAP rounds. This represents less than 10% of total Tiger losses, far fewer than losses to flanking fire from conventional ammunition, tank destroyers with larger guns, air attack, mechanical failure, or abandonment due to fuel shortages. Yet the psychological impact of those 20 to 30 frontal penetrations affected German tactical behavior across the entire heavy tank force. The broader lesson transcends the specific technical details of tungsten ammunition. By late 1944, Germany faced enemies who possessed superior industrial capacity, better logistics, access to global resources, and the ability to develop and deploy new technologies faster than German industry could respond. HVAP ammunition exemplified this dynamic. American engineers identified a problem, developed a technical solution, organized industrial production, despite material constraints, and deployed the solution to frontline units in quantities sufficient to affect tactical outcomes, all within approximately 6 months. Germany, by contrast, possessed excellent engineers and sophisticated technical knowledge, but lacked the industrial base and resource access to implement solutions at scale. German tungsten shortages meant that even theoretically superior, ammunition designs remained laboratory curiosities rather than deployed weapons. This pattern repeated across countless weapon systems and technologies throughout the war's final years. The human cost of these industrial and technical disparities was measured in lives lost in burning tanks. For Tiger crews who died when HVAP rounds penetrated their supposedly invulnerable armor, the specific technical details mattered less than the brutal reality that their protection had failed. For Sherman crews who successfully engaged Tigers with HVAP, the ammunition represented hope and empowerment after months of feeling outmatched. For the commanders who allocated scarce HVAP rounds and decided which units received priority, the burden of choice was measured in lives saved or lost based on bureaucratic decisions. Ernst Bäumer spent the final weeks of the war as a prisoner of American forces, captured on April 11, 1945, after his remaining Tigers were immobilized by fuel shortages and surrounded near Nuremberg. Allied intelligence officers interrogated him extensively about German tank tactics and ammunition effectiveness. His testimony, preserved in U.S. Army intelligence files, provided detailed confirmation of HVAP's psychological impact on Tiger crews. The tungsten ammunition destroyed more than tanks, he told interrogators in June 1945. It destroyed the confidence that made Tiger tactics possible. When your men believe their armor will protect them, they fight boldly. When they know American tanks can kill them frontally, they hesitate. Hesitation in armored warfare means defeat. The Americans did not need to destroy every Tiger with special ammunition. They only needed to destroy enough that every Tiger commander knew it was possible. That knowledge changed everything. This psychological dimension of weapons effectiveness often receives insufficient attention in technical analyses. The Tiger remained, on paper, superior to the Sherman in armor protection, firepower, and crew survivability throughout the war. Yet by early 1945, American Sherman crews increasingly held tactical initiative, while German Tiger crews fought defensively and cautiously. This reversal stemmed partly from broader strategic factors like air superiority and numerical advantage, but also from the demonstrated fact that Shermans could now kill Tigers under circumstances where previously they could not. The post-war development of tank ammunition followed directly from HVAP's proven effectiveness. The U.S. Army's post-war tank programs consistently emphasized ammunition development as co-equal with vehicle design. The M26 Pershing, rushed into limited service in early 1945, mounted a 90mm gun specifically to fire improved HVAP ammunition that could reliably defeat any German armor. The M46, M47, and M48 medium tanks of the late 1940s and 1950s all prioritized ammunition effectiveness, with tungsten and later depleted uranium penetrators becoming standard rather than specialized equipment. Soviet ammunition development, conducted independently but following similar technical logic, produced progressively more effective armor-piercing ammunition for the 34, 85, IS-2, and post-war Soviet tanks. The technical principles remained constant across all nations' designs, maximizing penetrator density and impact velocity through subcaliber design and advanced materials. The German Federal Republic's post-war Bundeswehr, established in the 1950s, emphasized ammunition effectiveness in its armored doctrine, partly because former Wehrmacht officers remembered how ammunition limitations had constrained their effectiveness in the war's final years. The Leopard 1 main battle tank, entering service in 1965, was designed around its ammunition suite rather than armor protection, reflecting lessons learned about ammunition, effectiveness versus armor thickness in cost-effectiveness calculations. The broader historical verdict on HVAP's significance is nuanced. It did not win the war, or even decisively shift strategic outcomes that were already determined by overwhelming Allied advantages in industrial capacity, manpower, and resources. What it did accomplish was providing American tank crews with a weapon that allowed them to engage German heavy armor on more favorable terms than previously possible. This tactical improvement boosted morale, enabled more aggressive employment of Sherman tanks, and forced German commanders to adopt more cautious defensive tactics at a time when Germany could least afford tactical caution. The technological arms race between armor and ammunition, between protection and lethality, continued throughout the Cold War and persists in contemporary armored vehicle design. Each improvement in armor technology provokes corresponding improvements in ammunition design. HVAP represented one significant step in this ongoing competition, demonstrating that metallurgy and physics could partially overcome disadvantages in armor, thickness, and gun caliber. For the men who fought in Shermans and Tigers during the winter of 1944 and 1945, these broader historical patterns mattered less than immediate survival. Tank combat remained extraordinarily dangerous regardless of ammunition types. Crews on both sides faced fire, explosions, and death in steel boxes that could become incinerators within seconds. The arrival of HVAP gave American crews somewhat better odds, forced German crews to accept greater vulnerability, but did not fundamentally change the terrifying nature of armored combat. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.